Hello and welcome to the Personal Finance Squad. If you're here, then you're serious about making a change or an adjustment to your life so that you can plan better for your future. And that means managing your bills, managing your debt, planning for today while living for tomorrow. So we appreciate that you've joined this squad, and let's get started. Welcome to the introduction of the Personal Finance Squad's I'm Not Flipping Burgers When I'm 70 book. We are now into the introduction. So a great question to start this off is, let's say, for example, you go to a stoplight and you look over and you see someone driving a Mercedes. What is the first thought in your head? Is it that the person has money? More than likely, the answer is true. And if you say no to yourself, then think about the person who pulls up next to him in a 15-year-old car. Now, you're going to think that that person has money? The odds are you're going to think that the person has less. Now, that may certainly be a perception, because in some cases, it could be that both drivers don't have any money. So when we say no money, we're just saying generally speaking in terms of how well off that they are. So what does it really mean for someone to have money? You have to understand the value of items that someone owns is only a perception of what they can afford. So what we're saying here is a person who earns $150,000 a year may be perceived as affluent as opposed to someone who earns 40. It's all relative to the earner. If the person who makes the 150 grand doesn't have money in their pocket and the one who has $40,000 does, then I'd rather be the person who has $40,000. Relatively speaking, over the last 20 years or so, you'll hear that I make a six-figure income, or it's still a mark of someone who actually makes pretty good money. So you can see here that $250,000, along with all the millionaires, from that level to that level, has increased significantly over the last 20 years. It's getting a larger gap between the rich and the middle class. And you're going to hear at this point in time, in the last few years or so, and we are currently in the midst of 2016, the middle class is drying up. The dichotomy between poverty, or those who make a low income, to the ones who are rich is alarming. Right here we see some actual data in that for the 2015 tax year, if you're in the top 1% of the earners, you're at $428,713. Now, there isn't anybody on the planet who can't live out that kind of money. And then you think, okay, well, I'm not even near that. That's probably most people who are listening to this video. And then it says here that the top 20% of the earners pay 87% of the taxes. Again, very alarming. So what we're getting at here is that, again, money is relative. Now, the more you can make, the better. It's a free country. And if you've earned it, you deserve it. But you always need to think about how you spend your money. And you hear the word budget, and a lot of times budget is something, the first thought in your head is, ugh, I don't want to do that. Or budgeting means cheap. That's the connotation it gets. But you have to understand major corporations, how businesses run, and certainly some people in their households, they have to work off budgets. If you do not know where your money is going and how you're spending it, you certainly can't handle the future, and you're putting yourself in jeopardy for your long-term goals. So for example, we see Coke and GE and Microsoft as some business examples. They've all borrowed money to run their businesses, and they still borrow money today. That's the way it works. So just keep in mind that just because you borrow money or have to budget it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that. If you think to yourself of all the times you've had all these up and down swings of money, where 1 month you're up and 1 month you're down, you're going to realize there's a reason for that. There's so many times, more often than not, you end up in the hole, not on the right side of things. That's because you don't track your money. So we're trying to pound home the point here that money is all relative. It doesn't matter how much you make. If you do not manage it and you do not pay it, you're going to end up in trouble at some point. You're going to end up with credit card debt, you're going to end up bankrupt, or you're not going to be able to retire. We can see that in this article from 2009 that Sports Illustrated that 78% of all NFL players have gone bankrupt within 5 years of retirement, and 60% of all NBA players fall to the same result. And that's the point we just made. It doesn't matter if you make $50,000 or $1 million a year. You have to manage your money. So we're going to be very loose with this interpretation, but let's just say, for example, that you knew that 78% of all your friends would go bankrupt at some point in their life. Let's just say you're 65 years old That means 78 people out of 100 are bankrupt. Could you imagine that being the case? Now, we understand that certainly NBA and football players are on a different level. They made different salaries. They're in a different lifestyle. That's not for many people to be able to do that. But it does show you, again, the value of managing your money, because it doesn't matter how much they make if you don't know where it's going. Here is another piece of good information. Budgeting is all based on a matter of choice and where your money is allocated. I purchased my first house for $76,000, and if I stayed in that house, I would have owned it 4 times over. But I had a child, and I had some more children, and I'm married, and I ended up buying another house. Did I have to? No. Could I afford to do that? Yes. But either way, it's all about choice. People don't have to have the big, huge, lavish houses or getting homes in nice subdivisions or the new construction places. You don't have to do all of that. It's all about choice. So you can see here, for example, a person making $250,000 a year could buy a home for $150,000 rather than a $500,000 home. Throw in some just general math here and say, hey, for 30 years for your mortgage at 5%, the monthly payment for the $500,000 home is $2,864.11 versus the $150,000 home at $805.23. It's more than triple. That is huge. So you can see that the difference right here is actually $2,058.88. And if you took that money that you would have saved and put it into this house, you'd pay that house off in 5 years. So we understand that it's all relative, but it does paint the picture of choice. You do not have to spend money in a lot of places. And so if you don't make as much as some of these other people, if you don't have a $100,000 income, or your income is $60,000 for your family, you're certainly not going to go out and pay $500,000 for a home, but maybe you could buy a $100,000 home instead. But there are people who extend themselves, and that's the whole point. This gets back to living within your means and not extending yourself no matter how much money you make. So other things you need to think about is your future. So for example, we say, okay, their 401k plans are pretty popular, but I believe about half the country only has access to them. So you could have a Roth IRA, and we'll talk about these vehicles within the book and the videos. For example, let's say someone makes $40,000 a year and puts 10% away for 40 years. Just using straight math here, that would generate $160,000 or 4 times the salary by the time they would retire. Now, that's not a lot of money. And that's the point. You have to put money away all throughout your life while living within your means. It's very important to do that. If this person's used to making $40,000 a year, this is a good number for them. Now you throw in interest and inflation and you make some percentage over the time of your interest compounding, that person will have enough money to live within their means in retirement without working. Again, these are all loose interpretations about money management and salaries and living within your means and budgeting. But the whole point of the introduction here is just to make sure that you start getting into your head that if you're reading this, there's a reason you're here. And that reason should be, I want to take control of my money and understand how to budget, how to pay down my debt, how to live for today, and plan for the future. That means there's a lot of things you need to do here. And you have to realize I have to live within my means, within my lifestyle for me. You can't worry about the Joneses next door. You have to worry about yourself. Because when it's all done, you only have your memories and your health. And if you can't afford to live and pay for things at some point during your life, or by the time you blow it off until you get old enough to retire and can't do it, you're going to regret it. So even if you're 20 years old or 30 years old and you're not thinking that way, you should start thinking that way now. Last little piece here, I'm not flipping burgers when I'm 70. That title pokes fun at the person flipping burgers at 70 years old is a thing that most people don't want to do. Now, someone could do that because they want to stay busy, and some people might have to actually do it. But the bottom line is no one wants to be flipping burgers if they don't have to. You want to be able to have choice when you're 70 years old. You don't want to be in the spot of trying to find ways to make ends meet when things are too late. Okay, this leads us to the final part of the introduction, and we're talking about Jasper. Jasper is a 28-year-old man who is working his first job post-college, more of a career-type job, and he's had an earned income, but this is going to be a much higher amount of money for him, and he wants to have a budget going forward to plan his future. We're going to follow Jasper in the construction of his budget, understand the choices he's made, and see how he plans out over a 3-year period, which will lead him into buying a home. So there'll be several videos, and there'll be chapters you can read on PDF, and take your time, walk through those. There'll be budget exercises and worksheets, all with video instructions, so you can follow along at the same time with Jasper, either with yourself or your classmates, and then you can take this into real life for yourself, and you'll be on your way to a clear and present success. Okay, so thanks for joining, and we will see you in the next video.